Crafty Gemini, and in this video tutorial, I'm sharing with you my top 6 tips on how to work with and sew with clear vinyl. Now, if you're new to my channel or my teaching style, I wanted to let you know that I do have online video courses that are available for purchase, and every year we try to launch at least 2 clubs that include a bundle of different projects. So I've done video bag of the month clubs and also video wallet of the month clubs, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, they never expire, so you can still sign up, and I'll include a link for those in the description box below. Now, it's 2018 and I'm gearing up to kick off a brand new club on some different types of projects. So here's a sneak peek. In this video, I'm going to share with you my top 6 tips on working with clear vinyl, because in the new club, we are going to be working with clear vinyl fabric. Now, it can be tricky if you don't know exactly what to do and are not familiar with the different things that you need to set up on your machine and what types of supplies and tools to use to make it a little bit easier for you. Now, I especially like to work with clear vinyl because it's great for a variety of zipper projects and organizers and things like this. This is my road trip project bag. I like to fill this one in with a hand project. In this case, I have some crochet supplies, but also for hand sewing, hand embroidery, things like that are great for in here. And you can see why we like to work with the clear vinyl, because you can see exactly what's in it. So now let's jump right into my top 6 tips for working with clear vinyl, so you too can try your hand at some of our upcoming projects in the new 2018 club. Tip number 1 for working with clear vinyl. I would recommend that you work with a vinyl that's a little bit thicker. The one I have here was purchased by the yard, same as this, but this is 8 gauge. And this one here is 4 gauge. These are the 2 thicknesses that I tend to keep on hand. The lower the number of the gauge here is going to be the thinner vinyl. So the higher the number, the thicker it is. 8 gauge is a great middle of the road type of thickness to work with. It doesn't stick to itself too much. You see how when I fold it onto itself, it's easy to take apart, so you can separate it out, cut it, and then also sew with it. 4 gauge is going to be a little bit thinner, but still doable for a lot of different kind of zip pouch projects and things. Now, on this sample here, this is an old project bag that I made years ago. You can see that I used a little bit thinner vinyl. You see how it crumples up easily? Not so much with the thicker kind. It's a little bit sturdier. So this, I use one of those clear vinyl table covers, which is a great way to save some money. You can get a whole huge one for not a lot of money, and you can cut it up and make a variety of different projects. Just try to get something that's a little bit thicker versus like a really, really thin one, okay? Another option is to use the vinyl that comes in the zippered bags where you buy your linen sheets and things like that. Those often you can cut them up and use them for your clear vinyl sewing projects. Again, aim for something that's a little bit thicker. It will make your life a little bit easier. It'll be easier to cut and easier to sew with. Now here's my second tip. When it comes to cutting, there's a few different things you can do. If you can still see through your vinyl, feel free to use some low tack tape. I would not suggest using a clear tape like this because it tends to leave a little sticky residue on your vinyl, but painter's tape or a low tack washi tape like this tends to work fine. And just place it somewhere that it's going to keep the vinyl steady and in place for you. And then what I like to do sometimes is to just use the squares on my mat to cut based on the size that I need to cut the vinyl. So if I need to cut a piece that's 2 inches by 4 inches, I know that 2 of these squares is 2 inches, and I have it lined up on this line. And then 4 inches is going to get me 1, 2, 3, 4 to right here, okay? So then I can take my ruler, place it on the lines because it's clear through and I can see flush down to the bottom. Go like that. If you've cut off a piece of it, just, I have it right on the edge, so I know when I cut here, it will be the exact size that I need. And then I'll cut right here and use those lines to help you. So here is my 2 inch by 4 inch piece vinyl. So this is one way to do it. You don't want to use scissors necessarily unless you're super careful, because you don't want to have choppy edges, especially if they need to be covered by fabric, which most of the time in most projects, you'll find that you'll need to have this sandwiched in between layers of fabric. I want a nice clean cut edge, so I highly recommend a rotary cutter and a cutting mat and some low tack tape to keep it down into place. Now, if you're having a hard time seeing through to this, another option would be to keep the tissue paper that comes with it and tape it down to that, okay? And then you can even tape it down to the mat. If it's a larger piece, you probably won't have a problem. But then you can use just the measurements on your rulers like you would regularly cut with your fabric. Sometimes you can see it a little bit better through here. So, and you can cut right through the tissue paper with your rotary cutter, no problem. And then just, based on the size that you need, use your ruler like that to cut the pieces that you need. And yet another option would be to cut the tissue first to the size that you need it to be, okay? Say I need this to be, 4 inches. And then use that as a template to place the vinyl over, okay? And I would tape the paper down as well so it doesn't move on you, especially for smaller pieces. But place it like that, and now because I can see down through it, I'm gonna basically line up my ruler along the paper. I have a bigger piece than I need of the vinyl, and I just line up the ruler on the paper and follow it around. If you cut that template to size, then you know that the vinyl is gonna match exactly as well. So a couple different ways that you can do it. I definitely encourage you to play around with some scrap pieces, but you can see that the rotary cutter cuts super smoothly right through the vinyl. And this is a quick and easy way, I think, to prep your vinyl pieces for your projects. Tip number 3, when you're working with vinyl that's wrinkled, okay, and this can happen based on storage, how you had it. This can also happen when you're making a project. If it's a project that needs to be flipped right side out, you're oftentimes going to have to mess with the vinyl like this to get the whole thing to flip out. If it's super wrinkled, don't worry, because there are ways on how to ease all these wrinkles out of your fabric. A couple of different ways is using a hair dryer on medium heat. I wouldn't get it super close, especially if you're working with thinner, clear vinyl. The thinner the vinyl, remember, the easier it's going to be to melt. So this is, I believe, my 8 gauge. Feels like it, yep, nice and stiff, but it's easy to get wrinkles into it. So what I like to do is sandwich, and I'm just going to do a little piece here so you can see. I sandwich the vinyl in just some regular quilting cotton fabric, all right? Then I warm my iron just to a medium setting and press. Do not hold it in one spot too long, and definitely make sure, if you're wanting to do a larger piece, then you definitely want to cover all of the vinyl with the fabric. You do not want to hit the clear vinyl with a hot iron. It will absolutely melt on you. And I just go back and forth a little bit. And you can see the difference. This smoothed out. Of course, let it cool back down a little bit, because you see that it's nice and warm. It's super pliable when it's warm like that. So just let it cool so it can come back to its basic consistency. But you can see the difference between this and this. So that's 2 different ways that you can iron out the creases. But remember, do not hit this with a hot iron. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it. Basically, you're wanting to apply some type of a heat that's not making direct contact with the vinyl. Another option would be to heat up your ironing board. And then the residual heat from here will also help. You see that? Smooth out the creases. I mean, it happens virtually instantly, okay? So several different ways. If you have wrinkled vinyl, don't worry about it. Just smooth them out and continue with your project. Now for tip number 4. This is on how to hold your clear vinyl to your fabric when you're working on your projects. Now, my recommendation is to use these little clips so that you can hold all the layers together exactly where you want them. Depending on what the design features of the specific project you're working on are, oftentimes you'll have the nice clean edge cut of the vinyl going inside 2 different pieces of fabric or more, and you're gonna sandwich it in there. So you wanna make sure that it's up in that fold. And so to do that, I like to push it all the way inside the fold of kind of the double fold tape that we've made here out of fabric, and then put the clips on it to hold it in place. Now for the same type of application where you're sandwiching the clear vinyl in some type of a double fold tape made of fabric, you technically can use pins to pin through it, because the holes that I've just created in the vinyl with the pin are going to be hidden by the fabric. But if you're working on a project that you have a clear vinyl edge that's exposed, or it's clear vinyl that needs to be stitched onto another piece of fabric, okay, where the vinyl is showing through, then you definitely don't want to put pins right through the vinyl, because you're piercing it. Instead of it going through some fabric fibers like cotton fabrics and things, you're now going through just the sheet of plastic, and it definitely does not look good. You're damaging the fabric, really, because it's making holes into it, and you can see what happens when you do that there. So keep that in mind, and my safest bet and recommendation to you is to just stick to the clips. Now, sometimes you're working with a larger chunk and you kind of need to put clips on two ends. If there's not enough fabric for you to place clips on, then there's some other options that you can use also. Things like double stick tape, some low tack tape that then you can go back and remove after the fact, but just try to stay away from piercing holes in your vinyl fabric if you'll be able to see it once the project is complete. Now for tip number 5, let's grab our little sample here and head over to the sewing machine to talk about sewing machine needles, thread, and the settings for your machine. For most all my projects that have the clear vinyl in them, on my straight stitch sewing machine here, I like to place the stitch length almost to a 3.0. So I'm going a little bit longer than I typically sew with if I'm just using cotton or polyester fabrics. And I like to stretch out the length a little bit so the stitches are not so small that they're so close, basically perforating the vinyl, okay? That's especially important if you're sewing vinyl to vinyl and it's not sandwiched in between fabric layers. So keep that in mind. You definitely want to play around with your sewing machine settings on some scrap pieces just to make sure that whatever your settings are on your specific make and model of machine are going to work. So I place mine just about to a 3.0 millimeter length, and I find that I can work with both 100% cotton and 100% polyester threads just fine. As for the needle here, I like to use an 80-12 universal needle. So even though I'm going through several layers here of both fabric and clear vinyl, I find that the 80-12 universal works great for my projects. Now for when you're starting to sew through the vinyl, here are a few different tips. I find that if the edge of the vinyl is basically sandwiched in between the fabric layers, it tends to flow through the presser foot smoothly, because if it's sandwiched and it has fabric on both sides, the fabric is what's feeding right up against the feed dogs through the machine, and then the presser foot end of it is also on fabric. So it's not that the vinyl is touching neither the metal base of the machine here and the presser foot. So it tends to flow through quite smoothly if it's sandwiched in. However, here's a really small sample. If you're working on a larger panel, the clear vinyl will sometimes tend to stick to your sewing machine table, or especially I find the metal base here. So sometimes it'll stick, and as I'm feeding the fabric through, even though it's on the fabric end, the vinyl section of it will want to get stuck, and so the machine just starts sewing in place. So one way to avoid that is to save the tissue paper, or just grab any tissue paper and place it on the base of your sewing machine as a buffer in between the feed dogs and the metal here, plastic, whatever you have on your table that will sometimes stick to the vinyl. And then also, if I'm sewing on the fabric end, I have a buffer. So depending on your projects, it might vary, but try to remind yourself to add some type of a buffer that will help feed the project through the sewing machine. So wherever the vinyl is, you want to have some type of a buffer, and I find that it goes a lot smoother. So you'll see, I'll take away the clip here, and if I'm top stitching this, see how it just feeds through? I barely have to hold it, and I don't have to feed it through. You can stitch right through the tissue paper, and all you're going to do in the end is basically rip the tissue paper from your project, and then you're done. The stitches look great. It doesn't stretch or pull your stitches because the tissue is so light. I wouldn't recommend using a thicker, like printer paper type of paper. It would work for what we need it to do, but when you pull on it, it may pull your stitches. So just aim for some type of tissue paper, medical examination paper, even newspaper would work great for this application. Now that's what I tend to do if I'm using this specific machine, because I don't have a non-stick or Teflon specialty foot for this machine. So if you don't have these specialty feet for your machines, these are the tips that I would recommend for sewing with clear vinyl. Don't feel like you have to stay away from the vinyl. You can still sew it using the tips that I just gave you. But I do have on my computerized machine a specialty foot, which is a non-stick or a Teflon foot. So let's head over to the computerized sewing machine and show you how I use this to stitch through clear vinyl on that one. All right, so at the computerized sewing machine, this problem here of the vinyl sticking to plastic and metal is still going to apply. So it's highly recommended that you use some tissue paper, some type of buffer here. But now, if we're sewing through vinyl to vinyl, let me get rid of the fabric for a second. Say I have a piece of vinyl that needs to be sewn onto itself for some reason. I need a buffer anywhere that there is vinyl. So I'll use a tissue paper underneath, And then for the top of this, I'm not going to use my regular sewing foot. I'm going to swap it out for the Teflon foot that came with this machine. And some specialty or higher end machines will typically come with a foot like this. Sometimes you may just have to reference the accessory guide in the back of your user manual to see about contacting your sewing machine manufacturer to get your hands on this specialty foot for your specific make and model. So I placed that there, and I'm just going to use a straight stitch. Again, I'm going to lengthen it to about a 3.0, and then I'm just going to sew. So you see how that foot now allows the vinyl to go through smoothly? Let's go back and do the same thing, but with the regular presser foot and see if it affects it. One thing to note is even if you're using your specialty Teflon or nonstick foot, if you find that the machine is just staying in one place and it doesn't want to feed through, remember, lengthen that stitch length. It will help feed it through a little bit easier because there's more spacing in each individual stitch. So let's try this. I'm going a little bit slower, helping it through because I don't want it to get hung up and throw my stitches off. So you see that works fine there as well. And I find that every machine is kind of slightly different. So another option would be, say you have a machine like this, but you don't have the specialty foot. Take off the regular foot, flip it over, and then use some type of a tape to basically create your own, because this is kind of what this has. It has a smooth finish there that's not metal that's going to want to stick. And these tips are going to come in especially handy if you're working with the thinner vinyl, because remember I said that stuff tends to stick to itself even more. So I just cut a piece of clear tape. You can trim it up if you want to make it exact, but basically I just want the underside of this to be the smooth side of the tape. So tape side up so it sticks to the foot. Put the foot back on. Now let's try to sew this with the tape on the bottom of the foot, but nothing under the feed dogs, and see if this machine will feed it through, even though it's vinyl on vinyl. So just grab a scrap piece and play around with your machine, but these are definitely some helpful tips. Oh, not bad. Great. So there we have it. So a lot of different ways that you can troubleshoot your machines, right? If they're giving you problems for sewing through vinyl on vinyl without even being stitched through fabric layers. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about my top 6 tips for working with clear vinyl. I definitely gave you a little bit more than 6, I think, in there, but I hope that that is plenty to get you started with trying your hand at working with clear vinyl. Definitely grab some scraps, try sandwiching it between a couple layers of fabric, stitching it to itself like I showed you in the video, and that way you'll start to get a little bit more confident with your sewing skills and working with more kind of non-traditional types of fabrics. So if you want more information on the upcoming club, definitely stick around. Make sure that you click the subscribe button and be sure to subscribe to my online email newsletter that you can sign up for if you head over to my website at craftygemini.com. You'll see a space there for you to enter your email address, and if you're signed up for that, then you'll be the first to know more information on my upcoming clubs. Thanks again for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up and share it with your crafty friends on the different social media sites. That would be great. If you try your hand at clear vinyl and want to send me a picture of what you're working on, feel free to tag me on any social media site using the hashtag CraftyGemini. Thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you very soon with the next one.